Welcome to Chamber Talk with North Orange County Chamber. My name is Andrew Gregson and our guest today is Brett Ackerman. Great to see you again, Brett. I think it's been all of last of 10 minutes since I saw you at our Fullerton Rotary meeting.
Yep.
Thanks for coming in. I appreciate it. And you also gave a quick invocation there, I think. Oh, no, not invocation. What was it?
It's a vocational minute.
Vocational minute, that's right. It literally was a minute, too. I was timing it. That's good. So anyway, Brett, you're a graduate of San Diego State University. You've worked in finance, real estate industry. You were a board member on the Boys and Girls Club of Fullerton long before you actually became the executive director. And that's why you're here today, is because we want to listen a little bit about your story. And of course, we've got a mixer coming up, which we'll talk about in a little while. Now, as I was reading a little bit about history, and of course, your father was also a past president of the Chamber. Very, very infamous man. He's done a lot of things in his life. You guys, you lived in Fullerton, your brother and your sister, and your dad became a senator. And prior to that, he served on the board and was president of the Chamber in 1978. And then throughout the 80s, he actually went on the Fullerton City Council and ended up doing 2 terms of mayor. So I suppose my main question is growing up, Brett, here in Fullerton with a very infamous father, how was that?
It's pretty interesting. Anyone that's been a family member of someone in politics can relate, but it's really hard to explain to most of the regular folks that don't experience it. But yeah, you couldn't go anywhere in Fullerton without someone coming up to my father and saying hello. And I would say half the time when I'd walk away, let's just say we're at a Cal State Fullerton baseball game, someone would approach him, Mr. Ackerman, nice to meet you. We'd walk away and I say, Dad, who is that? He says, I have no idea. But that's politics, you know, shaking hands and kissing babies and making everybody happy. But yeah, it was different, and a lot of people I don't tell this to, my middle name is Fuller, Fuller. And I grew up in Fullerton, went to St. Juliana's elementary school, and all the kids there used to tease me and ask me if they named me Fuller because my dad was mayor of Fullerton.
Right. That sort of makes sense a little bit. I get why kids would think like that.
And the other interesting thing is, too, that they thought we were rich.
Of course, automatically, right?
Yeah,
right,
everyone, when you see a public figure, the people know, oh, you must be wealthy.
Right.
And it's like, no,
just normal people trying to get by, right.
And just giving back to the community.
Yeah. Just by knowing a city council alone takes up so much time, and obviously if you're working for the government, it takes even more time. Was it just a case of you guys were just left with your mum, or was your mum busy? I mean, how was it?
So Mom was a great mom and took care of all the kids while Dad was working because he was an attorney by day and then by evening city council or whatnot. But there was many times where I would find myself sitting in the back of the council chambers till 10 o'clock at night watching a city council meeting.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, they worked in concert. My father coached all my sisters, my brothers, and my soccer team, so they're very involved in the extracurricular stuff. But yeah, he was very busy with his day job and then events in the evening, which they carted a lot of us to. It wasn't like they would just leave us out. We would attend a lot of these functions as kids.
So were you ever involved with the Boys and Girls Club as a kid then?
I went to the Boys and Girls Club as a kid.
Right.
So there was, there wasn't as many things to do when we were growing up back in the day. And there was just one particular thing that the club had. It was a caroms board. And no one had caroms, so I would always coax my mom into taking my brother and I down there and drop us off so I could play my hours of caroms with the kids. But yeah, they had friends that were involved in the club. I don't really remember much of that growing up, other than just attending the club.
And now your experience today, which we'll get on in a moment. How much different has the Boys and Girls Club evolved from when you were a kid and attended?
It's night and day.
Wow.
Honestly, like when we were kids, a lot of people used to refer to it as a swim and gym. So that's, people would go there to play sports or jump in the pool. But now there's so much competition in the kid after school world, if you will, that we have to evolve almost annually because things are changing so much. The trends change so quickly that we have to, we have our core staples that we stick with, the academic success, the healthy lifestyles, and the character and leadership. But within that, there's so many nuances to what we're having to do with the kids to keep them interested and keep them coming back to the club.
And so, for, what was it, almost 10 years, you were on the board, right? Just prior?
Yep.
And what made you make that jump from sitting back and just giving ideas to actually being the person to go out and get it done?
So part of that came from a unexpected career change. So the bank that I was working for at the time was purchased, and the new ownership came in and basically paid me to go away in October. So I had my first child in August of 2011, and then got let go from my job in October of 2011.
Oh, shoot.
And at that same time, the executive director that was at the club at the time had just put in his resignation, and he was there for about a year. And any of you board members might know that when your executive director leaves, it's typically someone on the board. There might be an interim staff that's there, but it's board led a lot of the time for the leadership. So myself and Jim Aurelio were kind of heading up the club the year before we hired this new young kid, if you will. And it was at the same time where we had torn down the old club and were rebuilding the new club where we sit today. And this kid quit like a month before we were moving into the new building. Oh. And I had just had a child, so I was preoccupied with dealing with that. And I was still on the board, but it was harder to get, I wasn't coming to Fullerton anymore for a job. So it was hard for me to stay engaged. But then it came to a time where we started needing to look for another executive director, and I said, you know what, I'm
ready.
I got nothing else to do. I'm gonna try this.
Right.
So I threw my name in the hat, and here I am today.
So obviously being on the board, you had a lot more insight as to what's going on. So first day on the job, probably a little bit less daunting than if you hadn't. But I mean, moving into a new building and everything, I mean, that's a lot of new stuff, isn't it?
So I'm gonna rewind you.
Right.
And it's very interesting how little you actually do know as a board member of a nonprofit organization compared to being a staff member. Mm-hmm. So what I thought I had was insight going in was absolutely no insight.
Right.
Because you just can't get the day-to-day being a board member and maybe spending 3 to 4 hours of your time per month on this organization that is much bigger than the 20 board members that are a part of it. So it was kind of a rude awakening to me to see how much there is that the board truly doesn't understand about what goes into the organization that they actually head up.
I'm just staying quiet because I have a board as well right now. So, but I understand exactly because it's hard anyway. Because like you say, it's a couple of hours that you're donating of your time to help out. But yeah, there's hundreds of hours that go into running an operation, isn't there?
I would say my first year on the job, I probably worked 14 to 16 hours a day.
I bet.
I'm in the office. I would be in the office for 8 to 10 hours. And my right-hand man, Kevin, I remember when I first took over, he would always try and get there either before me in the morning or stay till after. And then I think I tired him out because he couldn't keep up with it. But there was just so much to be done. And you just, on the nonprofit side of things, you just don't have the resources that are available on the profit side.
Right. Leading straight into that, what type of resources do you have as a nonprofit? And
so it's what they call a federation. So it's not a franchise, but a federation, and we do pay in annual dues to the federation for support and national staff and the whole national brand, if you will, but they also allow for pass-through funding through the national organization that if you're not a part of, you don't have access. So we, depending on the year, we'll get between $50,000 to $75,000 of competitive grants through BGCA that we have to apply for.
Right.
But it far outweighs what we pay to them on an annual basis.
Right.
But as far as other resources, it's whatever I can drum up. Yeah.
So talking about that, I mean, we're in a very similar field, being a non-profit too, and a lot of it's to do with sponsorship and stuff.
Yep.
How do you go about that?
It's different every year. And I would say with the pandemic, it's kind of stirred things up again as well, because a lot of it came from special events. So we would hold 2 to 3 annual events, golf tournament, auction. We used to do a brunch back in the day, but a lot of that kind of went away during COVID, and we had to figure out other ways to address the income gap, if you will. If you really look at the funding for us across the board, let's just use simple numbers. Let's say we're $1 million company.
Mm-hmm.
I would say before the pandemic, 300,000 was coming from paid for service, so our transportation program, things like that. I would say a third of it came from government funding or state funding, pass-through funding, Prop 49, No Kid Left Behind, the ACEs, after-school programs, and then the rest is corporate sponsorships, individual giving, grants, anything of that nature. So we have a good split across the board, which the only thing that really got turned on its head was the pay for service, our transportation program and stuff like that we were deriving a good portion of revenue from, dissipated in the last couple of years.
And is that something that'll come back in, or?
It's a good question, Andrew. I'm asking myself that every day when I go into budget season right now. It's really hard to say. So during COVID, we scholarshiped most of the families that were coming. I would say we had about 150 to 190 different families that didn't pay a dime during COVID.
Right.
Which that, if no one's paying,
something's got to pay. Got to say the electricity, food, right?
Exactly. So we're kind of retooling things, and the whole landscape looks different. We have less kids now after COVID, so it's less income, less kids, less staff. It all kinds of works out, but there's still a great need for this type of service in our community. And one of my goals when I took over almost 10 years ago was to try and get back to zero fees, or maybe just a one-time annual fee for the kid to come 180 days a year, which 3 of our clubs, we don't charge anything.
Mm-hmm.
And then our main site, which is our transportation hub, is where we derive most of it. So the income comes in there, and then we use that out to the other 3 sites to pay for operations that way.
No, I'll circle back to that in a moment. I remember we did a video a couple of months ago, and you'd mentioned that pre-COVID, I think you were on almost because you have multiple locations, over 400 kids or something, and of course now you're down to 100 and so. They didn't disappear? What happened? Where do you think? I understand COVID, but why not coming back? Where do you think they've gone instead?
That's what we're trying to figure out, honestly.
Right.
There's a good portion of the population that uses a service like ours, an after-school program, because both parents are working.
Mm-hmm.
So my wife and I both work. Our kids go to school, and then they were attending the YMCA that was on campus at their school.
Right.
During COVID, they were only letting in essential workers, so we had to figure out how to make it work with our 2 kids and our jobs, and we've figured it out. And it's the employment landscape has changed, where there's a lot more people still working from home and not returning to the office. So I think that's playing a role in some of the children that aren't there.
Right.
I think some of them switched to homeschool. I think the Fullerton School District has about 13,000 kids before the pandemic, and I think they lost close to 2,000 kids, and maybe 500 of them went to homeschooling.
Oh, wow.
The rest of them, no one really knows where they went. But I think a good portion of the kids that we used to see coming to our main site, I think their parents have been able to figure out how to navigate the pandemic lifestyle while taking care of their kids and still working. But there's a good portion of kids that just can't afford to pay, which a lot of the people don't reach out to see if we have scholarship programs. They just think, oh, I can't afford it, so I don't do it. Right. Or they just don't have time. They're always working, so it's hard to get that kid into something like this, and they just rely on their family members or their siblings to take care of their kids. But that's the 3-year-old question: is where did the kids go, and where did all the employees go?
Right. I circling back, as I mentioned earlier, I may personally noticing by doing a few videos of the Boys and Girls Club in the area. Yours is a Boys and Girls Clubs because you have multiple locations, where a lot of Boys and Girls Club have one location. You share a little bit about the reason why you have, was it 3 or 4 locations?
So originally, back in the day in 1952, when it started, it was just our one location that was right across where the community center is now. There was our building, and then there was a senior center. And with redevelopment funds, everything got put into one. But back in, I would say, the 2000s, the state passed a bill, the No Child Left Behind, so it opened it up for more after-school care. And the director at that time decided to take on 2 more sites, which are our school sites, the ACES funded sites. And then what is now the Mike Lozano Teen Center actually started as the North Orange County Girls Club back in the, I think they said, what was it at Rotary today? Maybe in the 80s, I think that building was built for the Girls Club. And then I believe it's 1989 is when the national charter switched to Boys and Girls Clubs. So we assumed that, and years ago that was where our Kinder's program was. Our Kinder and our transportation program was kind of run out of that site. And one of the staff had the forward thinking to notice that we needed a spot for teens and teens only, because they were having trouble mixing with the little kids
right, of course.
At the regular site. And that's what a lot of clubs struggle with only one club location, is segregating a space for the older kids.
Right.
So as much as it's nice to have multiple sites, it's also a pain in the butt, because then you have 4 times.
You're running around everywhere. Right.
So I envy the people that only have one club site, because there's nowhere else to go. You're there, and that's all you have.
Yeah.
But then if you want to grow and reach more kids, that's the only way to go.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, 1952. We're in now 2022. So you got 70th birthday this year, or you're celebrating that, and with us actually having on the 21st of November this big mixer at your place, that's it's almost like a double whammy.
Indeed, it is. Come with presents, please.
Come with presents, birthday presents for the kids.
Birthday presents or Christmas presents for the kid, however you want to slice it up.
Yeah. So last week we had Arthur and his sister Virginia from Sarayan's Arthur on our podcast, talking about they were giving some pallets of clothing to the Boys and Girls Clubs. Can you elaborate a little bit more about what's going on for that event?
Yeah, so Sarayan's Arthur, which is also a member of the North Orange County Chamber, was inspired by the Chamber giving back to the Boys and Girls Club in the region at the Business Awards dinner back in June of this year.
Oh, yeah.
And like you said, they'll be donating several pallets of Denim Bay kids' clothing to the Boys and Girls Club of Buena Park, Fullerton, and Stanton at a Businesses Give Back mixer held on November 21st.
That's right. And it's going to be from 11:30 to 1:30 at your location. We're asking the other Boys and Girls Clubs to come. And then we were asking business members if they would bring toys, because obviously Thanksgiving, I know it's a little bit for Christmas, but we just thought it would go with your birthday party.
Indeed. We start collecting presents yesterday for our Christmas event that we do for the kids in the community in December. So if anyone is so inclined to bring a unwrapped Christmas gift to the event, we would much appreciate that.
Is there any types of ideas you can give to people, so they, because if you don't have kids, you're like, well, what do I get? Where do I go?
You go to Amazon and you can buy whatever you'd like. Just don't buy any guns. If anyone
no
donates
Nerf guns or anything like that.
Nerf any bow and arrows, we take all that stuff away.
All right.
So keep it simple. Board games. The kids are so attached to their phones these days. It's hard to find any gift for a child that's 15 or under that they want to play with other than their digital device.
And is that what we're looking, 15 and under, right?
Basically,
Right.
if you're looking to give for the older kids, we typically just give them gift cards.
Oh, that makes
Because
sense.
at that point, that's all they care about is their digital device and
So
money.
gift cards for Apple
Yeah,
or
any of that stuff.
any of that stuff, Nintendo, anything like
Yeah.
that. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. Amazon.
Yeah.
Okay. That's cool. Well, thank you. I appreciate you sharing that bit because that's pretty important. Didn't think about that.
Well, thanks for holding this event, and thanks to Sarayan's Arthur for the donation.
Oh, of course. No,
much
that's
appreciated.
we're really looking forward to everybody coming out to that, and we'll look forward to, well, listeners, you'll see our emails about that. Anyway, so circling back to the Boys and Girls Club, one thing that I've not really been growing up here in America is because all we had was scouts and church.
Yeah.
So what's the difference between the YMCA and the Boys and Girls Club?
In my opinion, and not really experiencing the YMCA as a kid, to me it's more transactional basis. So the local Y we have here in Fullerton has a gym, and they have a pool, and they have a soccer field. But it's, when you look at that compared to a Boys and Girls Club, taken from the people that I've seen over the years, the club is more of like a second home for these children. So we're there in place of the parents, where I think the YMCA is something where the parents will take their kids to and stay there with them, or work out while they're maybe doing,
I like going to the gym or something like that.
exactly.
Right.
So it's and to be quite honest, I know I said earlier that we have a fee for service for some stuff. That's usually the differentiator, is the Boys and Girls Clubs will charge an annual fee for access to the club, which typically those clubs don't have a transportation program, so parents are dropping their children off. Whereas anything I've done at the Y, I've had to pay for.
Now, when you did your video, well, in fact, it was prior to that. You were talking at Rotary, and you were sharing or talking about the Boys and Girls Club. And that's what made me think about, well, maybe the Chamber could actually gift money at our awards dinner, which you just recently mentioned there. You were mentioning about sometimes these are the only dinners that kids get when they go to the Boys and Girls Club. How do you keep up with that? I mean,
It's not an easy task.
No.
There are a lot of food programs out there. The USDA has a large footprint of offering food to people that have the food insecurities. So a lot of that just comes through partnerships, because they would roll it down. Some clubs have a food service staff, and they're responsible for purchasing the product, putting it together, packaging it, and then delivering it to kids for snacks. So we take the easier route. We let someone else profit for it, and they deliver the foods to us that we can then pass off to the kids. And these food programs are interesting because it's offered to any child that's 18 or under.
Right.
So we have to post a sign that says we're basically a food provider, so anyone could actually come in and partake in our snack or our food program. But typically no one
Nobody
knows
does.
that. Yeah.
Right.
So it's a huge help for the families. You know, a lot of them are getting free or reduced lunch at school, and then they're coming to the club and they're getting that same treatment.
I was just thinking, when the schools are closed, I'm assuming you're wide open.
We are, and it's a daunting task because the schools get a break for summer and winter and spring break, but once those schools close, our doors open, and we're open all day rather than just being open after school. So it typically will be a smaller population that we're serving, because a lot of the families, myself included now, are starting to schedule those family vacations around the children's vacations. So, but yeah, it doesn't stop. We take off 1 week during the year to basically wrap up from the school year and the summer, and we take a week off to get ready for the next school year.
Wow. And I'm assuming, because obviously sometimes they do well, obviously all the time, but they're doing this after school program. How do you keep up with the school curriculum? Because you're teaching basically continuation, aren't you?
We are, and we aren't. So that's another difference kind of between the school's after school program, if you will, and the Boys and Girls Club. So we want to be an extension of that school. We want to help and support those kids in what they're learning at their school. So we every day we segregate 1 hour, which we call power hour, for the kids to finish their homework, get it done so that they don't have to take it home and bother their parents to get it done, because quite frankly, some of their parents don't speak English and can't help them with the homework. So we offer that hour every day, no matter what, at all of our clubs to our children to get their homework done. But then after that, it's kind of up to the children of what they want to do. So a slogan that we say is they vote with their feet. So we offer up different programs for them to attend, and they choose if they want to or not.
Oh, that's cool.
So we don't, the only thing we force them into is their homework hour, which not many of them like, but they get used to it. It's a routine.
Right.
Kids need to be put into a routine or they won't do anything.
Right.
But the benefit of the club is that if a kid doesn't want to do art, they don't have to do art. They
Right.
can go do STEM, or they can go play in the gym. They can do what fits them best.
And you were mentioning before that you've collaborated with other clubs, and you're doing sort of more technical things like teaching kids how to do things like podcasts and stuff. You want to?
So the benefit came to us from the North Orange County Public Safety Collaborative is what it's called now. And it's ourselves, the Fullerton Club, the Buena Park Club, and the Cypress Anaheim Club submitted for a grant to start up a podcast program for our kids.
Right.
Which is kind of funny. When I sat down in here, I told Andrew he's going to have to come in and talk to my kids about podcasting. But we've done it. We started it this year, and it's been great. The kids love it. Mm-hmm. You know, it gives them a forum, just like we're doing here now, to express themselves, mm-hmm. and no one can question it. Mm-hmm. And it's really been great for these kids, because it's not just the talking and sitting here. They have to do the editing, the post-production, and the posting, and all that stuff. So it has that element of kind of workforce development, giving them, because a lot of these kids just want to be YouTubers now.
Well, yeah,
that's what they think the job market is moving forward.
Well, you know, and I was watching a program, Netflix, right? It's just these documentaries that Netflix are throwing out are amazing, and it was in Australia, and it was talking about TikTok, funnily enough. And there was this one young lady there that she was making way more than her mum and dad who were working. And she was only working 3 hours a day, yet she spent so much time getting ready for it. And, of course, she'd missed hanging out with her other friends. Yeah. And it was, I haven't got to the end of the series yet, but it was very interesting to see. But at the end of the day, you offering this type of thing, it just educates everyone more in what we're doing anyway. Yep. It's almost like an on-site training, isn't it, really?
And it's tough, too, because these kids, especially the teenagers these days, they don't know what they want to do when they grow up.
Right.
I mean, heck, I don't know what I want to do when I grow up.
We still don't know what we're going to do.
But it's a matter of giving these kids options and things that kind of correlate to what you see is happening in the world and where things are going. Because everyone was anti-podcast from the radio side, because all the disc jockeys, it's like, these
don't
aren't
steal you, I'm going to license.
But you see it everywhere now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just more and more common. The access to it is easier and easier. The streaming has changed
dramatically.
Yeah. I mean, the music, the radio, all these formats. So just exposing these kids to not just the one aspect, the glamorous aspect of talking into the microphone, because there's much more that happens after that that they need to understand. Yeah. Which a lot of them don't want to.
No, but they're learning, and like you say, you get into a routine, and suddenly it's like, oh, I get it, I know what I want to do.
Which since you threw it out there, I'll throw in a plug. It's called the Tri-City Podcast, and primarily I see it on Spotify. I'm not that sharp with other streaming platforms, so I know you can find the Tri-City Podcast on Spotify if you're interested.
Oh, well, there you go. You can also find Chamber Talk on there too. It'll be on a different search, I'm sure, though. So, Brett, looking around, and obviously, hopefully, we've got quite a few listeners listening into this particular podcast who are local. How can people get involved with the Boys and Girls Club? Because it's not just about sponsorship's huge, but what else is there? What else can people do to help?
It's sky's the limit, to tell you the truth. The the financial resources are obviously our number one that we need from the community and supporters, because that's what makes the world go round in my business. A lot of grants that are funding us, they don't like to pay for staffing. But when you look at a Boys and Girls Club, that's about 80% of my budget is staffing.
Staff, right, of course.
Because we're an extension of the school. We're basically...
You need somebody to watch after everyone.
We have ratios of how many staff to kids that we need. So the financial piece is a huge aspect. But just any of the volunteers' talents, if people want to help tutor, we need tutors.
Okay.
If people want to help coach basketball, we need basketball coaches, referees. There's so many different avenues that you can help. The hardest part is getting that volunteer that doesn't know what they want to do into their place. Because a lot of what we do, staff, volunteer, board, is all driven by passion. Right. So if your case, podcasting, if you had insights or anything like that you could bring to our kids, spending an afternoon talking to the kids about your experience, your knowledge, and passing that off to them. Right. So we build the platform for the program, and the community members are the ones that can really enhance that program with their actual knowledge and experience of whatever that industry may be.
Right.
And because we're working with kids that are as young as 5 and as old as 18, you have a run of the gamut.
So because we've got a huge university here in town, is that also an option for students to be able? Because this is what a great opportunity maybe to show a little bit about what they're learning or even what they've learned.
Yeah, and the pandemic put a real kind of stop to a lot of that, because a lot of the kids were only wanting to volunteer virtually. And if you hadn't noticed by the last couple of years, anything you try to do with children virtually as far as school or education doesn't work very well.
Right.
So we're kind of getting back into getting the volunteer groups back in to help, and I really am trying to get my claws deeper into the school to get a better connection with the academia and getting more support for our kids around English and mathematics, because that's really what they're suffering from the whole COVID pandemic learning loss.
Now, one thing that we've discussed often when we've met is you're definitely looking for people to help driving your wonderful vans there. You want to share a little bit about that in case anybody's listening?
Employment opportunities. We are definitely hiring. So anyone that's interested in driving in the afternoons safely to pick these kids up from school and bring them back to the club, we are interested in that. Just the mentors that we need on a daily basis to work directly with the staff, we're looking for that. We're looking for people that are engaged and want to make a difference with the kids, not just have a job. And I would say that's the hardest part of our industry, is really trying to engage the people that have a passion for working for kids, or it's baby steps. They're wanting to be a teacher, they're wanting to do something with child development. The Boys and Girls Club is a great place to start that journey.
Now, sort of as we're winding down to the end of our little podcast here today, part of your job is also planning for the future. What types of plans have you got for the Boys and Girls Club of Fullerton?
That's a tough question too, Andrew.
I know. It's been on boards, they get used to asking these questions.
I could have answered that much easier back in 2019, but since 2020's come around, it's made it a lot more difficult. We have been in the talks with the city of moving our location over to Independence Park, because one of the things I'm trying to do is leave the club better than I found it.
Okay.
And we're in a situation now with the lease that we have with the city, it's just not sustainable for a nonprofit over the next 50 years. So what I'd like to do is find a place for the club that won't have to worry 50 years from now of what they're going to do, where they're going to go. Because the city, a lot of the stuff in the city has changed dramatically. The city's struggling with staffing and those types of issues. But what if I had to go pie in the sky thoughts, it would be that no child has to pay for the services at the Boys and Girls Club for anything.
Right.
And a new home. That's my big focus.
And would it be one big home, or you'd still have these other, because you got the schools, haven't you?
Unfortunately, we would still have the other sites. Yeah, I mean, in the Boys and Girls Club world, I've talked to a few different execs that say you never want to walk away from any of the sites, but when you look at our situation that we have at the community center, it's just not a viable option for a 50-year option.
Right.
So I would leave that site and open another one, but yeah, we would keep the other two.
Okay.
Other three.
Well, Brett, it's been a pleasure having you on today. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for inviting me. This is my pleasure.
And those of you listening, thank you very much. We invite you to join our email list by visiting nocchamber.com and selecting Sign Up for News at the top of the page. For more interviews, visit chambertalk.podbean.com.